It used to be, even 10 years ago, it was better to have your money invested in, well, from my perspective, in property than it was to have your money in the bank. Right now, well, actually, even 3 months ago, it was actually quite okay to have your money in the bank because interest is fine. There'll be another point where it's much better to have your money in stocks and shares or whatever it is. So I think it's about understanding that. It's also about understanding what spins your wheels. So I really like buying a property and getting it, doing something to it, not necessarily doing it up, but doing something to it, putting my stamp on it, I guess, and then either renting it out or selling it on or whatever. But some people don't like that at all. Other people love to watch the stock market. And I guess that's the other thing, is that it's a lot of fun if you can use your investments to also enhance your life.
Hello and welcome to the Ways to Wealth podcast. We have another online episode recording today with Andrea Leslie. Andrea is one of the directors at Primary ITO, and she has been talking to us about some of the stuff they're working on, and we wanted to really gain some insights from Andrea about how she's kind of curated her career and some of the stuff that Primary ITO are working on as well. And really kind of just discuss the typical stuff we do on this podcast. So, Andrea, welcome. Thanks for coming on and spending some time on the pod. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone, and then we can get into the convo.
Kia ora, Charlie, and thanks for having me along. It's always interesting reflecting on life's journeys and how we get to be where we get to. So I'm Andrea Leslie. I'm the Executive Director at Primary ITO. Primary ITO is a business division of Te Pūkenga, which is a consolidation of all of the polytechs in the country and all of the ITOs as they were. And we're currently going through another phase of change. Our Minister of Vocational Education is currently undertaking consultation. So my role at the moment will change again in the next year, but that's what I'm doing. So my office is in Wellington. I live in South Canterbury in a place called Timaru, rurally based. Have been a sheep and beef farmer and a pig farmer, and all sorts of other things to do with the primary sector in my life's journey. Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
We had another guest recently from the primary industry, so it's quite cool to get that perspective, especially as a lot of our audience are, I guess, more tech focused and knowledge workers, but it's really interesting to get a broad idea of kind of the other areas of the kind of economy. And primary industry is such a large part of New Zealand, so definitely quite a nice kind of exposure for us that are not, I guess, so exposed to that on a day-to-day basis. So I guess your kind of career was focused more so in the primary sector, and then you found yourself getting into, I guess, a more educational-based company or government-ran institution based on your experience in the primary sector? Or
Yeah.
how did that kind of come about?
Sort of. So, it's kind of the longer story is that I grew up in a very small town called Pleasant Point in South Canterbury. We had 7 people in what was our 7th form class, so year 13, as we call it now. And I went off to Christchurch to university and quickly discovered that the classes at university were a lot bigger than I could ever have dreamed of. I think my first lecture had 500 people in it, and all of a sudden I was a name, not a name anymore, but I was just a number. And my aim at that point in life was to be a marine biologist. So I've always loved nature and thought that would be where I would head. One thing that they don't teach you too well at a school that has a very small number of people is that you're not that important and that you will fail in life. And both of those things I learnt very quickly in my first year at university. So whilst I was going to be a marine biologist, it ended up that I got a degree in psychology and also went to Teachers College at the time and got a diploma in early childhood education. So my career started actually as a as a kindergarten teacher on the west coast of South Island in Greymouth, and which was fantastic, great opportunity, and I'd encourage anybody to, if they ever have the chance to uh, to live and work on the west coast, or even a remote region, because you learn a whole lot about communities, particularly about small communities, about the strength of the regions of New Zealand, and also learn an awful lot about yourself. So, yeah, I wasn't there. I was there for about a year, and then got a call from a friend of mine saying, "Would you like to be a tutor of nanny students in Christchurch?" So, when I was 23 years old, I left the coast and went and lived in Christchurch, and taught students how to be nannies. And back in the day, in those days, in the 90s, having a nanny was something that farming families often had, and not only farming families, but everybody had a nanny, or if they were it was an option for preschool education. So that was great. And after 4 or 5 years of being in Christchurch, it was just time for me to come home to South Canterbury, and for all sorts of reasons, I wanted to come home. My dad had been a school teacher for 40 years, and he was retiring at age 57. And he said, "How about you come home and let's go pig farming?" So the two of us from education, who knew very little about farming pigs, thought, well, why not give it a
Right.
go? Just a great opportunity. So I guess this is where the whole it started, with an education, vocational education, and being working in the primary sector, and it hasn't stopped. So um, from
Yep.
from there, I've continued to be a tutor, continued to be, and then married a farmer, so was a sheep and beef farmer, and worked my way through different vocational education settings, and worked in polytechs, worked at private training establishments, and I'm now working in industry training.
Awesome. And what sort of, I guess, what did you learn from taking that plunge into being a pig farmer? What was the biggest learning experience?
I think the biggest learning experience about farming is, and I think your other guest, who's a farmer, might have said this too, is the need to be multifaceted, and to have many skills, and to be not only able to work with animals, but there's the financial considerations, the environmental considerations, there's working with people, there's working with product, there's obviously the budgets, there's the animal health,
Mm.
there's the bringing the right professionals into your business as you need them, asking for help, and just that constant learning, and actually managing with high levels of stress, because uh, animals are unpredictable, and as is the environment, and things can go wrong, and when they go wrong, they go really wrong. So yeah,
Mm.
so that was yeah. And I guess that's also the importance of farming, is all about that learning, and being able to learn how to access the information that you need when you need it.
Yeah, totally. And then, how, you've done a lot of other things as well in terms of directorships and being shareholder and a
Yep.
partner of different kind of projects,
Yeah.
businesses, operations. Uh, what has that taught you, and what have you gained from having, I guess, this variety of partial roles that may not be so operational but are more governance and oversight?
Yeah. So I guess kind of, and it happened by accident, but now it's very much who I am. Is that when I was started at university, I was doing university and I was doing teachers college at the same time. So I've always had a double role. So I've always had a job and something else. So
Yeah.
um for all sorts of reasons. But my governance, I guess I got into governance way back in the day when we had very little children, and I think my first governance role might have been the treasurer of the Cave Aubrey Plunket Society or something like that. One of those very important roles that start, and it gave me that insight into, actually you can make a difference through governance, and you can
Mm.
be involved in kind of making things better, and
Mm.
but it doesn't have to be a full-time role. So, I've sat on boards, like we have a maternity ward at Timaru Public Hospital. When years ago, they were developing a new maternity ward, so I sat on that governance board, and to basically just build up my skills and offerings, I guess, to governance. So I've I've sat on the Timaru District Council as a councillor. I was elected there. I've sat on the ARA board. I've sat on various school boards. I've been the chair of school boards. And it's been very much a learning opportunity and a giving back
Yep,
opportunity.
totally. Awesome. That's really interesting. Um, yeah. So kind of that was that's quite an interesting kind of part of someone's trajectory, is to get into those roles, and quite entrepreneurial in a sense because they're fractional. Um, how does one start kind of looking into getting into governance roles if they are so inclined to give back and kind of provide their, I guess, insights and value to potentially, I guess, a non-profit or some other institution? I guess you have to start with, probably the typical path is maybe starting with non-profits and kind of smaller organizations, like perhaps even like school boards and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think well, there's two ways I think you can get into governance. One is by starting small and being there for genuine reasons, because you're not going to get paid on a school board or
Yeah.
being the treasurer of the blanket. Um, and you do it for a genuine reason, which is basically to give your service to
Yeah.
to whatever it is. And often it's really helpful if you've got some sort of you can actually bring something to that board. So if you've got a finance background, or if you've got um, a property background, or something that you can bring to the board is helpful. Um, and that is basically working your way up. But alongside working your way up, I think people need to be prepared to undertake, you know, governance sessions. So I am a member of the industry IOD for directors. Um,
Yeah.
and it helps because they often have a podcast you can listen to, or there's programs, so finance that will beginners and those other things. So that's really helpful. But it's also about putting your name forward and being available, and
Mm.
you just take a risk of people might not wanting you to be there. So when I was appointed to the ARA Polytech board, for example, that was very much a stringent application process for that role. So it wasn't,
Mm.
hey, I'd like to do this. It was like a job interview. Being on the
Totally.
district council, you actually need to put your name up and be prepared to advocate for yourself and to sell yourself to be on the council. So you've got to have a backstory. You've got to have some authenticity about yourself, and you have to know what it is that you're bringing to it.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so now moving on to, I guess, primary ITO and the kind of challenges and the environment there, um, and how the industry is kind of evolving. How do you see the primary industry, I guess, in New Zealand evolving over the next 10 years? And um, how does it maintain strength? And how do people start to look at getting into that as a career option? And what are the best options for people?
Yeah, lots of questions there. So the primary sector. So I've been now involved with the primary sector for over 30 years. And we continue to talk about, and when we're still talking about it, we're still talking about the need for leadership, the need
Yeah.
for very strong, collaborative, cooperative leadership, so that we have a strategy for the country that is going to get us to where we need to get to. Um,
Yeah.
and that strategy, in my opinion, must include ensuring that we have the right people with the right capability to
Yeah.
do the work that is required. So we've got a prime minister who Christopher Luxon, who has said very publicly, very frequently, that he wants New Zealand to double the value of exports in the next 10 years.
Mm.
And in order to double the value of exports, we need to understand what it is that we're exporting, what it is that we are producing, and how we produce product that has greater value than what it has now. So it's not about doing more of the same. This is about ensuring that whatever it is we're producing has greater value to our export market. And providing greater value requires understanding, one, the export market, but understanding also how to produce that product. And that's where primary ITERA comes in. So that's where the training in the workplace comes in, because we are able to train people to ensure that that product, the value of that product is increased. So, like that's a really small example. I don't know if you've ever had a French rack that, in a restaurant, that beautiful, gets a lamb that's cut in a certain way. Now, if you cut that right, you'll get that bit of meat and with bones is worth, say, $100. If you cut it wrong, it's worth $5. So doing the job well and doing it right the first time is really, really important, just so we don't lose the value on our product. So that's where, so for primary ITO, we work in all sorts of sectors throughout the food and fibre industries. But meat processing, for example, learning how to process meat really well, keeping the value really important. And horticulture, pruning, picking, really, really important to get that right throughout the year so that you've got the very best value from the product.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it's one about obviously what you're selling, and it's two about the quality of that you produce. But then I guess three, it's about how do you increase productivity and optimize costs to also increase your margin, which you can be beneficial
yes,
as well, for
yep.
sure, in
And I
any
think
business.
the other thing for the farming sector the agriculture, food and fibre sector, full stop, actually, it's not just farming, is that
Yep.
as a country, we've put an awful lot of pressure on these people. They're supposed to be, providing opportunities for exports. They are supposed to be managing the huge number of costs that are increasing all the time. They've got to manage, and as I said earlier, the banks, the finance, the environmental impact, animal health, uh, employing staff, all that collection of skills that people are required to have to run a successful business is actually, you know, we need it. We need unicorns, and we need government support to create those unicorns.
Right. Mm. So in terms of building wealth for yourself and navigating your career, was there a moment in your life where you made the decision that uh, you needed to be conscious about it with you and your within your family? Was it something that you kind of got into early, if at all? Like, what was your kind of journey and relationship with, I guess, finances and building a future that was sustainable?
Yeah, so probably the moment was when I got married, and we went to the lawyer and we said, "Hey, should we sign a prenup?" And our lawyer said, "So, like, what have you got? What assets have you got between you?" And we said, "Oh, well, no, I've got a car," and he had a car, and he said, nothing, nothing. So no prenup. Go away, make some money, and it's yours." And it was a real aha moment of, okay, so that's good. We're starting from base, and where do we want to get it to? How do we want to get there? So there's been a number of things that we have done. We have invested in property in farmland, but it's also about that having the confidence to work with banks, to borrow money, to make the right decisions, at the right time, being patient. Sometimes it's all about, sometimes things fall through and you think, no, but that was the number one big thing. In actual fact, what it's done is left you the space and time for the thing that is the right thing to happen. Um,
Yeah.
I also remember very clearly saying to my bank manager at the time, I'm I'm sick of being treated it, like I don't know anything about finance. So I was a farmer from an education background, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, you know, where are the scones?" Basically, rather than actually taking me seriously as a business partner. And my bank manager at the time said, "Go and do your master's degree. Get your master's,
Right.
get it at finance, and people will trust that you know what you're doing." So, good advice. So I went and got my master's degree at Deakin, and it's actually been really helpful for all sorts of reasons throughout my journey. But it's also been actually I do understand finance. I do understand risk. I do understand, you know, um, risk profiles, all those sorts of things that can happen. So basically, we've leased farmland over many years, and at the same time, we have bought um, rental properties and sold rental properties, and basically manipulated. Not manipulated, that's the wrong word, but use the market as it's worked for us to just gradually increase our capital wealth. Yes.
Nice. And and what do you think about intergenerational wealth?
From what perspective? As far as
I guess, yeah. it- I guess, is it important from your perspective to have a legacy live on and provide resource to people, I guess, further behind the journey and kind of pass things along, or do you think that impedes development, or and when's the right time to even consider intergenerational wealth and helping people get a leg up? Is it at the end, or actually is that too late and maybe we should be looking at intergenerational wealth and skipping generations, um or kind of helping people earlier, even if it's less, because at least then they get that opportunity of compounding from an earlier age, whereas sometimes we can receive these inflows perhaps at a time where it doesn't work in our favor, it doesn't work for as long, so then the impact actually is perhaps less. I heard from the last person I interviewed that was in the primary sector saying that sometimes the succession planning is executed too late, and then the people that are kind of in the succession plans are kind of getting skin in the game, perhaps too far along in their life.
Yeah, yeah. So two parts of that. I believe strongly in generational wealth, and I believe there's there's lots and lots of different types of wealth. So my grandparents, for example, were not they didn't have a huge amount of money in the bank, put it that way, or asset, but they had really strong work ethic. They really loved their family. They built a really solid and stable background for their children. And to me, when you pass that wealth on, just as being great parents, then my kids had that wealth they could provide to us, their children. So it's wealth doesn't just come because you think it should. It comes from a lot of hard work, the confidence to make really good decisions, and also the confidence to fail, because that's obviously always happens, because you fail often more often than you succeed. Um, so 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 that wealth, that depth of thinking and integrity and authenticity and all those sorts of things, ca- if we're really lucky, it's very intergenerational. Um,
Yeah.
that's the answer to that. But in our family, our children who are in their 20s have certainly and they have their inheritance in their hands. So we're not waiting to die to provide that to them. They've got to start, and that's up to them with our support to use that, to invest it wisely, to grow, to use it to bounce, and to take some risks, but to develop their own portfolios. So But at the same time,
Mm.
they need to be prepared to work and to make good decisions and to be sensible about it. And it's not an overseas travel fund. It's a actual build your wealth from here. So
Nice. That's really cool. And would you say that the portfolio construction is changing and evolving over time, or do you think that they will keep a similar kind of approach to what's worked for you and your family so far?
I think it's changing all the time, isn't it? Like it used to be even 10 years ago, it was better to have your money invested well, from my perspective, in property than it was to have your money in the bank. Right now, well, actually, even 3 months ago, it was actually quite okay to have your money in the bank because interest sort of is fine. There'll be another point where it's much better to have your money in stocks and shares or in or whatever it is. So I think it's about understanding that. It's also about understanding what spins your wheels. So I love I really like buying a property and getting it, you know, doing something to it, not necessarily doing it up, but doing something to it, getting it, putting my stamp on it, I guess, and then either renting it out or selling it on or whatever. But some people don't like that at all. Other people love to watch the stock market or love to, um, I don't know, whatever else. And I guess that's the other thing is that it's a lot of fun if you can use your investments to also enhance your life.
Yeah, that's an interesting take for sure. If there's obviously a passion or an interest, it's great to be able to garner that. But then also, I guess it's about trying to work out what works for your own personal circumstances, given that different assets have different attributes, whether it be income, liquidity, appreciation profiles, volatility, and portfolio construction has become more of a open discussion over the last kind of 10 years, especially. Um, and of course, our income is a huge asset to us, and making sure that we can spend less than we earn.
Yeah, it's a good it's a good plan. It's a good plan. It's interesting though, we've just at in beginning of the year we bought a golf shop, which my husband well, he owns it's his shop. Um and um and he has been a farmer, so an outside person. The skills that he learned as a farmer are actually quite relatable to being in retail.
Yeah.
There's lots of things that you just transfer. Um And the great thing about the golf shop is, as an investment, obviously, but then the other aspects of the golf shop that are so fulfilling, like working with people who are passionate about something and supporting them, providing a service to them, they're the sorts of things that within our family really spin our wheels. So it's about whole
Yeah.
that whole service mentality. Um, and so if we had bought the shop and then just left it alone, it wouldn't give us nearly the same joy as the shop
Yeah.
does now. So
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, totally. No, that makes a lot of sense. And often the way to kind of get um now with all industries it's different, retail versus farming versus a business that you provide a kind of a service for, etc. They all have different profiles of kind of what the outcome or what the exit ramps look like in the future.
yes,
But of course, owning a business that you own and operate often is the best way, or at least the best way to get a non-linear return. So some sort of outcome that is not necessarily tied to an interest rate or a yield on either dividends or income from a property, or your kind of typical profile of owning an index fund or an ETF that's well diversified. I guess secondly to that, it would be then owning individual liquid assets have, I guess, characteristics that might be closer to a business that you run and have the kind of accountability for the outcomes. But obvious. It seems to me that owning a business or owning a farm, for example, in the case of New Zealand, which has been a place where lots of people have generated wealth, it's something that you can nurture and you can have an impact on that ultimate outcome.
Absolutely.
And
Look,
that comes with a lot of fulfillment, but also challenges, of course.
yeah, exactly. And people think that farming is a fantastic lifestyle, and it is. It really, really is. If you want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, totally.
and you do need to love it. But I think it is, that saying, if you find something you love, you never work a day in your life. And if people are farming and that's how they feel about it, that is just magic. Um, and
Yeah,
I
totally.
do I do think though in New Zealand is it's very easy to underestimate the capability of farmers. We've had go back to primary ITO. Um, a lot of people have been told in their school time, oh, you're not very clever, so you should be a farmer. Well, in New Zealand,
Right.
some of our cleverest people are farmers because you have to be. You need to be clever, intellectually clever, but you also need to be really capable, practically and everything else. So, yeah, I think we really underestimate um, people's abilities, and um, I think that's very disappointing. And one of the things, but
Mm.
once again about primary ITO, is that when people then develop their skills and they get a qualification through those skills, that really demonstrates the that they are, or gives evidence of that capability and skill and confidence. So, more and more, if we can see more and more people entering into qualifications in the primary sector, more and more we reflect the requirements for the sector. If that makes sense. So if we have unqualified workforce, people are going to continue to say, actually, you don't need to be much to be a farmer or a producer or a grower. But the more we can provide qualifications for people, the more we can evidence the the value of the people within the sector. So and that's the other thing that primary
And totally. And for someone that's looking to um, get into the primary sector and has the ambition perhaps of building wealth through that career, what would you say the first things they should be looking at doing?
The first thing they need to do is make sure they're going to love it because it's hard work. So it's not just for anybody, just not just a kind of a, "Oh, let's give it a go." It's hard work. It's incredibly rewarding, so make sure you love it. Find somebody ideally, you find somebody who's in this sector now, who can give you some support. Talk to people at Primary ITO, talk to, your Lewy bodies, talk to Dairy NZ and Hort NZ and Beef and Lamb, Seafood New Zealand, whoever it is, talk to those people. Find an employer, get a job, give it a go, and get some training, get some qualifications, and work your way up. I think we the very best of roles don't just happen. People don't just land as the boss or the owner of a farm necessarily. You've actually got to work for it, and
Yeah.
it's being prepared to do that. Um, I do think it's being prepared to take risks because you know farms are big money. Well, if primary industry is big money, and then that incurs a lot of debt, and sometimes that works
Right.
out, sometimes it doesn't.
For
So,
sure.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
So you got to be prepared for that if that is a path that you want to take, because that is a liability that will kind of sit on, I guess, you and your asset base, which means that you have to be prepared mentally and psychologically and really be convicted that it's a kind of path you want to take in order to make sure you're not getting yourself into a situation where you're going to have increase your risk of a bad outcome.
absolutely. So, just a little bit of context. Some farmers might owe $10 million to the bank. If you are going to, I don't need maths on this one, but if you are going to increase interest rates by 1%, all of a sudden that's another however many there's another $100,000 that business has got to generate in order to pay that extra 1%. So it's
Totally.
it keeps you awake at night, that's for sure. And so while these decisions can be made quite freely for, smaller debt ratios, it's very difficult for those larger ones. So yeah, as I say, the risk, and that's why people have to absolutely love it, because it's all consuming.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I feel like I've learned even more about the primary industry over the last couple of weeks now. So thank you so much. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going and keeping the relationship growing. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Charlie. Great to have a chat.